Let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking 10 Machiavellian psychological principles. Now, right off the bat, let's clear something up. This isn't about becoming evil or cruel or some mastermind manipulator yourself. That's actually a super common misconception. Really, this is about building acute awareness and honestly vital survival skills against the people who do play dirty. It's about learning how to stand completely upright in a room where, frankly, everyone else might already be lying. We're going to look at how to spot those hidden power dynamics operating just beneath the surface of everyday interactions.
So, let's start with a pretty painful reality. Why is it that dirty players always seem to target the best people? It feels totally counterintuitive, right? But here's the thing. Dirty players, they aren't hunting for power directly. They're hunting for patterns. Because of that, your good, transparent, reliable folks become their absolute prime targets, simply because they're predictable. Think about it. If you behave the exact same way in every situation, expecting everyone else to hold the same moral standard, you're inadvertently handing a manipulator a highly detailed map of exactly how to navigate you.
And that brings us to a really crucial dichotomy. On one hand, you've got the comfort of morality. Good people assume shared values. They hope things get better, and they often hesitate out of basic human decency. But the dirty players? They operate with a totally different mindset, a sharp mind that's completely free from that comfort of morality. They aren't looking to attack your strengths. They are purely calculating advantage. They quietly observe. They position themselves, knowing full well that your expectation of universal fairness is, ironically, your biggest vulnerability.
Which leads us straight into phase 1, the trap of predictability, or what we call exposure.
You see, manipulators rarely attack your strengths head-on. Instead, they are incredibly patient. They test you through a very calculated sequence. First, it might just be a small delay. Maybe they show up late just to see if you'll actually apologize for their rudeness. Crazy, right? But then it escalates to a subtle misrepresentation of something you said. Next, a tiny shift of their responsibilities onto your plate. They are watching your reaction like a hawk. Do you stay polite? Do you over-explain yourself instead of just observing what they're doing? Because every single time you react with hope, instead of enforcing a boundary, you're teaching them exactly how far they can push without facing any real consequences.
Just look at the trap of fairness. A good person calculates ethics, while a dirty player is busy calculating advantage. Insisting on equal standards in a totally unequal environment, that just hands all your momentum right over to the other side. Why? Because you are binding yourself to a set of rules that they threw out the window a long time ago. Justice without enforcement is, well, it's just symbolic decoration. If you are relying on fairness alone to protect you, you are essentially trading actual strategic success for mere moral satisfaction. And this plays right into a particularly insidious tactic: identity confusion. Rather than coming at you directly, a dirty player will drop subtle remarks or maybe compare you to a past version of yourself entirely to destabilize your self-concept. For them, control becomes absolutely effortless the moment they manage to fracture your internal certainty. Because once you start doubting your own authenticity, bam, your energy gets completely redirected into second-guessing your own behavior, which effectively neutralizes any resistance you might have had against their moves.
So, to counter this kind of exposure, you need a rock-solid foundation. Here is your mental anchor to keep in mind for this phase. I move with awareness. To defeat identity confusion, you've got to anchor your identity internally. That way, external commentary just completely loses its power over you. Remember, you do not owe consistency to people who haven't earned your trust. Choose strategic ambiguity over constantly volunteering your limits. All right, moving into phase 2, the power of silence, focusing on restraint.
There is a massive difference between over-explaining yourself and using strategic silence. The very instant you start justifying your decisions to a manipulator, you're surrendering your authority. You are practically handing them structural material, your priorities, your fears, stuff they can immediately twist and weaponize against you. Strategic silence, on the other hand, it can't be edited, it can't be quoted, and it can't be reframed. It offers absolutely zero surface area to attack, and it actually forces the other side to project their own insecurities right into that uncomfortable void you just created.
Building right on that silence is the delayed response. Dirty players rely heavily on speed. They thrive on urgency. They want you reacting fast, so your ability to choose your words deliberately goes right out the window. When you intentionally withhold an immediate reaction, you strip away their orientation. It actually triggers their anxiety, because suddenly their minds are racing to figure out exactly what you're preparing or where they might have misjudged the situation. Now, the absolutely crucial takeaway here is that walking away is not running from conflict, not at all. It is a stunning demonstration of autonomy. Dirty players measure their influence by the amount of attention and the reactions they can provoke from you. When you walk away, you completely collapse their stage, you remove their audience, and deny them access. This immediately shifts the focus back onto them, making them second-guess their own effectiveness, all while you get to preserve your energy. It's a win-win for you.
For this phase, your mental anchor is simply, I control the pace. By truly owning this affirmation, you realize that restraint communicates incredibly deep confidence. You aren't avoiding the issue. You are simply choosing to act only when the pressure has shifted back onto them and they've exposed their true intent.
Let's transition into phase 3, disruption. This is all about flipping the board. Here we find a really fascinating concept called controlled weakness. Usually, raw force just attracts resistance, right? But when power is hidden, people relax. So rather than trying to prove your competence too early, which actually shuts down the flow of information coming your way, controlled weakness keeps the channels wide open. By selectively letting manipulators think they have the upper hand, they get sloppy. They rush their decisions, they talk way too freely, and eventually they completely overexpose themselves.
But you also have to disrupt their positioning tactics. Dirty players rarely launch a direct attack, mainly because open attacks create resistance. Instead, they rely heavily on context. They quietly assign you a role, maybe they paint you as the difficult one or the overly emotional one, and then they just sit back. They literally let your loud, predictable defense do all the heavy lifting of confirming that exact stereotype to everyone else in the room.
To shatter that positioning, you need to employ strategic inconsistency. As long as you're predictable, they can plan around you. But when you selectively vary your availability and your responses, you create intense psychological friction. You break the patterns they rely on, forcing them to slow down and completely removing their false sense of entitlement to your time and energy.
So your mental anchor for disruption is, I am unpredictable. Adopting this mindset signals true autonomy. Now, to be clear, you aren't creating random chaos. That would just be confusing for everyone. Instead, you're introducing intentional variation. It actively prevents others from designing traps around your default behavior.
Which brings us to our final phase, phase 4, the ultimate goal, elevation.
So how do you actually achieve untouchability? Well, you establish total self-command, and you keep your explanations minimal. Becoming untouchable means making interaction with you extremely expensive for manipulators. You pull this off by completely closing off the emotional access they so desperately need to calibrate their pressure against you. You base your stance on consistent, unwavering principles, but you entirely stop chasing the outcomes.
There's a quote that brilliantly summarizes our whole journey today. Power doesn't shout, it adjusts the environment. I love that. True power isn't about being the loudest person in the room, and it's certainly not about fighting every petty battle that comes your way. It is quiet alignment. It's about shaping the context of a situation and selectively reserving your access only for those who genuinely respect your boundaries. I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. Are you ready to stop reacting and become completely untouchable? Remember, manipulation only works where access is cheap. I really encourage you to use the principles we've unpacked in this explainer to remove your predictability, reclaim your energy, and elevate yourself completely out of their game. Stay sharp out there, and thanks for joining me.